They were my golden trio. Then I found out they'd been playing me for years, so I turned our whole life into a slow-burning psychological trap. If you had asked me 5 years ago what my life looked like, I would have described a sitcom montage, coffee runs, terrible movie nights, inside jokes that lasted for days. We were 3 idiots who built a micro-universe where nothing could touch us. Me, my best friend Alex, and my girlfriend Mara. People thought of us as inseparable. Hell, I thought of us as family. That's why the betrayal felt like someone digging a hand into my ribcage and twisting. The signs were subtle at first. A change in tone, a laugh that stopped when I came into the room. A shared glance that had nothing to do with whatever joke I'd just told. Mara started canceling movie nights with a half smile and a work thing. Alex was always on call for freelance gigs that mysteriously required late-night meetings. I told myself I was being insecure. You try to choose trust over suspicion because the alternative is to watch everything fall apart and feel like trash forever. Then, 2 months before our anniversary, I found something that didn't leave room for doubt. A Polaroid shoved behind a stack of old board games in Alex's apartment. 2 hands intertwined, a cheap motel keycard on the table, and Mara's bracelet looped over Alex's wrist. Not just a picture, an artifact. Up close, I could see the smudge of lipstick on the cup beside them. I nearly threw up. I didn't explode. I didn't send a single accusatory text. I took a breath. Then I did something people usually only read about in movies. I let them keep playing the happy part while I planned a demolition. Here's where I deviated from the usual revenge playbook. I didn't want a single dramatic reveal. I wanted their ecosystem, everything that supported them, to rot quietly until it collapsed under its own rot. I wanted them to be the architects of their own destruction. First, I hired a private investigator. Not because I wanted a spy thriller montage, but because I needed a patient, legal way to map patterns without becoming the psycho. The Pi's work was dry and perfect. Credit card records, timestamps, hotel registrations. It gave me a map. Then I started what I called the long game, which had 3 lanes: professional, personal, and reputational. All slow, all precise. Professionally, Alex freelanced for a handful of boutique design agencies. He loved the prestige of being that guy who could waltz in and charm executives. Mara worked in development and had a very particular boss who hated scandal. I began by seeding innocuous doubts with people who mattered. A former colleague of Alex's, someone the Pi uncovered who'd been burned once by his flakiness, received an anonymous email containing only dates and invoices that didn't match project timelines. It was enough to make the colleague run a soft background check. When the colleague called Alex to ask about it, Alex stumbled. Little cracks. For Mara, I quietly contacted a board member of the nonprofit she volunteered at and casually mentioned that I'd been helping with donor lists and that I'd noticed some odd donations tied to certain hotel names. I had the PI's spreadsheet. I wasn't inventing anything. The board member, who'd been worried about fiduciary issues, decided her committee should have a closer look. Again, nothing defamatory, just things that made people check their apps and ask questions. Personal lane. This is where the psychological pressure built. I began knitting small, believable coincidences into the fabric of their days. I'd accidentally schedule a dinner where both would be invited and then cancel and say I was sick, so they'd end up alone together. I'd leave an ambiguous receipt on Alex's table, a restaurant receipt with only the initial A scrawled on the tip line, and I'd watch Mara's posture shift when she caught sight of it. I didn't confront, I salted doubt. But the most dangerous part of the plan, and the part that made everything worthwhile, was reputational. The trio's social capital was their currency. They'd used it to ease past messy things. If I could make it so their social currency became worthless, they'd be left exposed. So I did something incredibly mundane and painfully effective. I became boringly reliable. I started showing up to things I usually skipped. I returned calls people assumed I'd never make. I volunteered to host gatherings. People who had taken me for granted noticed me in a new light. Meanwhile, I started telling small, true stories about exhaustion and trust and boundaries. Not as accusations, but as confessions in one-on-one talks. Those little confessions made people think, not about me as a victim, but about how relationships actually work. Seeds again. The plan's middle act was theater. I engineered a confidential group chat leak. Using contacts the Pi had tracked, I arranged for a mutual friend to inadvertently include Alex and Mara in a thread discussing a work retreat. That friend forwarded a message complaining about late-night project meetings and linked calendar events tied to hotels. The 2 of them opened that thread in public at a rooftop bar where half our social circle was, and their faces did what I'd wanted them to do. They looked like guilty children. People started watching. But here's the twist I did not initially foresee. One of their other lovers, a woman named Tasha, who thought Alex was leaving his girlfriend for her, recognized Marriott confirmation numbers in our little packet of documents. She confronted Alex in a way that was catnip for drama by posting a screenshot in a private, previously neutral group chat with an explicit note that read, "Hey, Why am I seeing these dates? That screenshot leaked, and once people have screenshots, they start to take sides. The avalanche accelerated. Alex's client, who I'd nudged earlier, raised questions about timeline discrepancies and asked for a formal audit. Mara's nonprofit temporarily froze a grant while the board did a compliance check. Colleagues whispered, the circle that had once propped them both up became a tribunal. They were no longer charming. They were liabilities. Then came one of the cruelest, most ironic moves I orchestrated. I set up a reconciliation dinner. I told Mara I wanted to talk. She came crying because she couldn't keep holding two worlds. Alex came because he wanted to control the narrative. I made sure the restaurant was filled with people I trusted, people who would not intervene but would bear witness. When they argued, when accusations ricocheted, I let them. Then, with an almost clinical calm, I placed two things on the table. A printed bank statement showing a series of reimbursements from a shared account that actually traced back to me, and a voicemail I'd recorded months earlier where Alex joked to a friend about using someone's trust as an ATM. The voicemail wasn't illegal to possess. The bank statement was my own money. Both were truth. They turned on each other with a ferocity I had predicted but still found delicious. Alex accused Mara of engineering fake receipts. Mara accused Alex of fabricating evidence to cover the affair. For 5 minutes, the only sound was their own screaming. People watched. People took mental notes. Their allies began to thin. You can't orchestrate everything. A few things still surprised me. Mara tried to salvage her image by going to a well-known local blogger who'd once supported her work. She offered an interview full of half-truths, but the blogger, who'd already had coffee with me a week prior because I wanted to tell my side, had the receipts. He published a long, carefully sourced post that didn't point fingers at me but laid out how messy lines get blurred when trust is weaponized. The echo was devastatingly clinical. Then the legal stuff started. Alex's biggest client dropped him, citing conflict of interest and ethical concerns after their internal audit. Mara's board publicly reprimanded her and placed her on administrative leave, pending an investigation. The two of them had to explain themselves, not to me, but to institutions that mattered, employers, clients, donors. Once institutions get involved, rumor stops being rumor, it becomes paperwork. Their excuses started arriving in official memo format, which anybody who's ever lied knows. Lies don't hold up to subpoenas and spreadsheets. The last act was almost anticlimactic in its ordinary cruelty. The couple's once solid financial safety net began to unravel. Clients were canceled, donors paused, friends made choices. Alex sent me a message begging for a meeting. I blocked the number. Mara left voicemail after voicemail until I disabled notifications. Once in a while I'd let one ring so I could drink black coffee and feel the electric thrum of control. I didn't smash their cars. I didn't post humiliating videos. I did the thing that hurt smarter. I systematically removed the scaffolding that allowed them to keep living the lie. They imploded internally first. Trust, which is a form of currency, burned between them. Then externally, reputations suffered, livelihoods frayed. Am I proud? Conflicted? A part of me felt monstrous. The other part felt liberated. You don't get to take people who have been family and hollow you out without a response. I went to therapy to keep myself from becoming the kind of person who thrives on retribution. Therapy helped me see the line between justice and cruelty, and to keep my feet on the right side of it. Months later, Alex relocated to a city 3 time zones away, taking 3 fewer clients than he used to. Mara resigned from the nonprofit quietly. The exit package was thin. Our mutual friends splintered into factions. A few people I thought I'd lose ended up being the ones who stuck by me. I rebuilt, not loudly, but deliberately. I started a small online project that paid me more than I expected. I dated badly, then better. I learned the physics of boundaries. Here's the ugly lesson I want to hand anyone sitting in the smoking ruin of a friendship or relationship. Vengeance isn't glamorous. It isn't a montage. It's patient, boring work, cataloging, calling, and choosing the legal, moral levers that make people accountable. It's making allies of institutions and letting truth travel through paper trails and polite emails until it becomes undeniable. Do I wish things were different? Of course. Would I have preferred to never need to be clever enough to bring them down? Absolutely. But they chose a life where secrets were currency and friends were collateral. I chose to cash that currency in by dismantling the system that let them profit from my trust. When the dust settled, I had my life back. They had each other and the mess they had to live in together. Sometimes that's all the justice you need.